Welcome to the second virtual episode of Texas Public Radio's storytelling series, Worth Repeating. I'm Andrea Vocab Sanderson, San Antonio's Poet Laureate 2020 through 2023. This country's legacy of racism has come into sharp focus since the killing of George Floyd. His death put police brutality against Black Americans on the forefront of our nation's consciousness. There have been weeks of rallies and marches in protest of police brutality and racial injustice. Systems of oppression and ideologies of hate are being acknowledged and challenged through both conversation and confrontation. Individuals and families, community, faith leaders, politicians, and even corporations are standing up to support the simple yet somehow controversial declaration that Black Lives Matter. It's 2020, and a reckoning with racism, both past and present, is long overdue. We hope that this series, in tandem with other efforts to confront issues of racism, will help inspire real change in individual attitudes and actions, and move us closer toward the long overdue eradication of white supremacy, oppression, and injustice for Black people and communities of color in America. A viral video of a white woman threatening to call the cops on a Black man birdwatching in Central Park sparked outrage and frustration across the country. These emotions are familiar to Lorenzelle Harper, who is regularly profiled by white women who seem to fear the idea of him more than anything.
Before I leave my home each day in San Antonio, I make sure that I always put on a superhero costume. Why? Because I'm trying to protect myself from racism and prevent anti-Blackness. So you may ask, well, what is a superhero costume? I want you to imagine every time before you go out, picking clothing that doesn't make others feel threatened, that doesn't make them fear you, that doesn't make them feel intimidated. The superhero costume is to make you appear safe and less intimidating. So how do we assign a threat level to clothing? Very easily. Highest level of threat clothing are baseball cap, basketball caps turned backwards, athletic clothing with logos, sportswear, flip-flops, the basketball slip-ons, basketball shoes. What are safe clothing? Polo style shirts, khaki pants, khaki shorts, boat shoes, anything that looks all American, something that makes people not fear you. That is just a fragment of the stress I go through, what I'm trying to do to prevent racism and to just keep people from displaying anti-Blackness when they see me. Just some of the things I'm doing as a Black man. Now, safe clothing such as a superhero costume is not going to protect me from anti-Blackness. It's not going to stop racism from happening to me, because some people may just already have in their mind when they see me, they're going to fear me just because I'm a Black man. So I don't have enough time to go into all the examples of racism I have, but there's one that sticks in my mind and I'd like to share it with you now. So I want you to imagine the times BC, before Corona, when we went to bar and grills and we were just packed elbow to elbow. It's a 3-digit hot summer day and you're inside enjoying the cool AC with just some of the coolest best friends, a support system. You feel affirmed, you feel accepted, you just feel like you can just really be your authentic self with these people. You're laughing, you're joking, you're having a good time. So in the middle of that, you've been in this bar and grill for a while. You said, hey, just gonna take a quick stop to the restroom. So the restroom is located in the rear of the bar and grill. The only thing back there are the restaurants and a janitor's closet. No exit, nowhere to run. There isn't even anywhere to hide. As you are walking back to the restroom, a lady sees you and she grabs her purse, So you walk back to the restroom, you're angry, you are pissed. You want to say something to this woman, but you just know that it's not the right time and it's probably not going to end very well for yourself. So you think, I have an idea. You ask your friends who are with you. Now, you're a black male, so you ask a white male who is a close friend, and you ask a Mexican male who's a close friend, both of them with you. You say, can you do me a favor at separate times? Walk back to this restroom and see what the lady does. She's sitting in the rear at the table. Both of them came back and told me she didn't even look at her purse. She looked at them and she did nothing. So, how I feel about that is racism is wrong. I do believe that racism can be eliminated when non-black women reject what they were taught, this fear of black men. And the reason why I say this is that this type of racism is taught. And for those of you who are doing this, people see this example. If you are locking your door, shutting your window whenever you see a black man coming. Something else, if you are exiting the elevator, if you are immediately crossing the street because you see someone, especially a black man coming, or the other example is you're walking with someone and you stand close to them because you see a black man, you are passing on racist examples for young girls or other women to see. So I do believe racism can be stopped when those who are doing such actions stop and just realize the long-term destruction of what you're doing and the negative example you're going to others. So, and I just want to say non-blackness, the anti-blackness and just fear of a black man, it's not just limited to white women. This is something that I've experienced from just a lot of women who were not white, but they were not black. And I just want to just close by just saying, as a black man, even though I'm wearing a superhero costume, it does not always protect me from racism and anti-blackness.
Sometimes racism is obvious. Other times, it's harder to pinpoint. It manifests in microaggressions. It is implied or masked in polite words. Covert racism makes for an extremely toxic workplace environment, as Judith Vega knows firsthand.
I used to work for an organization in equity and inclusion, and what my job entailed was helping the organization look both internally and externally at policies and procedures, and also hiring practices, as well as communication strategies and outreach and retention with the communities that we serve and the clients that we serve. I was really excited about this opportunity because I am from the east side of San Antonio, and so I have observed for my whole life the unequal treatment and opportunities that exist in everything in education, housing, employment, and even the quality of our parks. So I was really excited about this opportunity. I thought that it would be also an opportunity to expand some of the social justice work that I had been trying to do within the organization previously, and bring in more employees from the community to better serve the community. And so it soon became apparent that, I think internally we had a lot of issues around covert racism, and, I wasn't going to be able to really do my job in the way that I thought I could. And so what this, I think it was really apparent and very much about the way they hired people and they selected people for supervisor and leadership positions. They were primarily white women, and I encountered, the covert racism of the office, of the politeness, and I think, I had seen that because I'd been on hiring panels before where very qualified candidates were not chosen in favor of other candidates, and excuses were given such as the fit of the person or the way that they communicated. And they were primarily women of color who they would be speaking about. I experienced it myself as a hiring manager when I was trying to bring on someone who was very qualified for the job and with very strong community connections to the program community that we were trying to serve. And I was told by a lot of people in leadership and several of my colleagues, please don't hire this person. This person is not fit for this job. And also, really they couldn't really tell me anything about this person's performance. It was really just the way in which she communicated. And, I recognized very soon that a lot of times when women of color, are strong, opinionated, or defend themselves, they are accused of, being aggressive or angry. And so this was really why she was a strong communicator, and this is why I think they were threatened by me hiring her. I was able to bring her on, but I continued to experience a lot of problems. I was scrutinized a lot for any decisions that I made. I had another experience with a colleague where I had let her know during a meeting that I had some concerns about the program that she was starting and how it might be perceived by the community she was serving. And she got very upset with me during this meeting. After this meeting, I tried to speak with her. We went to my office, and she started to cry. She started to say, you're victimizing me, you're just so aggressive, you're just so critical all the time. I explained calmly that this was part of my job to help troubleshoot and problem solve, but she continued by stopping the tears, and telling me, you will watch in the way in which you speak to me. I want you to be careful of the tone in which you speak to me. And she said this very sternly. I maintained my composure, but it was definitely like classic tone policing, classic white tears, classic white fragility, and it just got uglier and uglier after that. It became just a really uncomfortable environment. All of my performance was being over-scrutinized, but no matter what I did, I was told the opposite, to do the opposite and then criticized for doing the opposite. And so I finally just walked away from that environment. It was very toxic. It started to really stress me out. So I walked away. And I continued to do social justice work and work in community, but if anything, that experience really hit home for me about the discrimination and inequities that my community experiences, and especially Black and Latina women. And I want to be able to help others learn through my experience, and also just strengthen my resolve to address racial justice and social justice in my work.
Racism can rear its ugly head anywhere, on the street, at a store, in the workplace, and even in a 6th grade classroom, like Kirsten Thompson's, where she was schooled in many subjects, including racism.
Looking back, I can honestly say that I can't remember a time where the ever-present undercurrent of racism was just absent from my life. Rather, it seemed to sort of always be there in the ether, kind of lurking about, and it informed so much of how we existed, whether that was expectations of behavior as children because the standard is different, or if we could pass through a certain town, depending on the time of day or night. But one particular experience that I had early on delivered a gut punch to me that I still remember vividly, viscerally to this day, 30 years later. It was the summer of 1991, and my mother, my 2 sisters, and I had just moved to San Antonio, Texas from a small town right outside of Houston. And I was excited. I was elated because I was going into junior high. In my mind, junior high was close to high school. Therefore, I was entering the world of adulthood, and I was very eager to make new friends, to just be in a new city, but also to learn because I was a nerd. So one of my favorite teachers, the second year that I was at this school, 7th grade, I just adored her. She was tall, she was elegant, she was worldly, she always talked about her travel, she had impeccable diction, and I really looked up to her. And I enjoyed going to that class because I always got extra credit opportunities, I always had little side projects, and she would actually talk to me as if I wasn't necessarily a student, but just another adult, and I really liked that. One day, I noticed that more Black girls were being enrolled into the school. Now, this was significant because the school was mostly white with a small Latino presence and a few Black children sprinkled here and there. And I was friends with everyone. I didn't belong to a clique. I didn't have a crew. I didn't have anyone particular that I was besties with. I just got along with everyone. But in that 7th grade year, several new families who were military had moved in and their daughters were enrolled at my school. I was so happy because I was starting to see more girls who looked like me. So during lunch, I made friends with them. We introduced ourselves. We hit it off. It was wonderful. I began to harmonize in the hallways. We would sing together. We would make up little dances outside on the blacktop or even walking, from class to class. I was elated. And then one day, that teacher and we sort of made eye contact in the lunchroom. And I didn't know what it was. I just knew that it was a little bit different from how we normally connected. But I didn't really think anything of it. I just sort of waved and she sort of nodded and then she left. And because I had her later in the day, it was several hours later when I saw her again. And after class, she pulled me aside and she said, "Kirsten, you have so much potential. You are so smart. You're just one of my favorite students." And I was like, "Thank you." And then she sort of lowered her voice and said, "But I want you to be really careful about who you're hanging out with." Now, I had a very conservative, strict upbringing. There was no hanging out. I didn't know what she was talking about. So I asked her, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I noticed you've been spending time and kind of hanging out in the hallway with different kids, a different crowd than you normally do." And the only difference that I could think of was these 3 girls. She said, "You have so much potential. I just don't want you to ruin it." And I sat there for a minute, completely confused. And then my confusion turned into sadness because I really liked my new friends. And then my sadness turned into anger. I was livid because I realized that she really meant that she just didn't think I should hang around that many Black students, and that hanging with those students would somehow mess up my potential. I never looked at her the same that day. She always insisted I was still her favorite student, but I stopped caring. And every once in a while, I'll get that same knot in my stomach when I'm in a similar position, because those things, they stay with you viscerally. A friend of mine said recently on social media that racism is like that toxic friend that's always in the middle of every argument in a circle of friends. And when you start to examine it, you realize you don't know what anyone's arguing about or what the issue is, because that toxic friend will be there and will show whatever face is necessary. The face that I was shown that day was racism. It was subtle. But discouraging a child to hang out with other children who haven't done anything wrong just because there's too many of you together is a problem. And until we start to face these sorts of problems head on and identify them and call them out, then nothing's ever really going to change. And best believe, if I ever run into that teacher, I will be sure to tell her how she made me feel that day.
Systemic and institutional racism are ingrained in the U.S. criminal justice system, inside and outside of prison walls. Leonora Walker couldn't wait to move on after serving her time. But freedom means less when the system is designed to keep you down.
I want to talk to you how I feel that I am no longer a citizen here in America. And the reason why I say that is because I am somebody that's formerly incarcerated. I had done an offense, did my time, came out, and was labeled and stigmatized. Mind you, I had a 3-year probation that I have successfully completed, but it was by the grace of God and help of many others that I was able to do so. See, my probation, I had to go there, and I lived in a shelter and didn't have great transportation. So that meant I had to take the bus system. The bus took me about 2.5 hours to get there. Then I would do any type of program, things that they asked me to do, and then have to spend another 2.5 hours getting back home. If I don't make it to my probation appointments, if the bus missed, if I can't get a ride, there's an opportunity from that technicality alone that I could be reincarcerated. Sounds like a setup to me. How am I supposed to feel like a citizen? So let's talk about employment. Okay, I come out. Before I was incarcerated, I was a successful real estate agent. Now, mind you, I understand. Now I'm no longer able to be a real estate agent, so I need to find employment. I was told from my probation and my case management, you know what, you should just apply for SSI because at this point, Lenora, it's going to be hard for you to work. I don't want to be on SSI. SSI is very limited to me. Mind you, I don't take offense or anything from anybody that does SSI, but for me, somebody that loves to work, SSI is not an income. It's not a way that I would be able to make a living. So I decided that I was not going to do the SSI and I was going to continue on trying to find work. Well, when I tried to find work, I applied at a store, and I remember applying at this one particular store, and all of a sudden they immediately, as soon as they found out that I had a felony, told me that I would not be able to apply and get the job and position. Okay, so I go back to my case managers and I ask them, what do I do for work? They send me to a staffing agency. Now, this staffing agency does daily, hourly employment. So it's a day labor. So I go to the staffing agency and I find out I can get a job at the same store that I tried to apply for, a big store chain that I tried to apply for, making very little. It would have been $10 to $11 that I would have made at this store. But during going through the agency, I would make $7.25. How am I supposed to live on $7.25? How am I supposed to be a citizen and productive? And I can't even make a good income for my family because I'm labeled. Any career, any job opportunities that have great advancement, that can be successful, even with education at some point, are still barriered from people that are ex-felons. It's very hard getting employment. Let's talk about housing. Housing is barred from you, by the way. So when you come out and you want to find a great apartment, as soon as they find out that you're a felony, you cannot get that apartment. But they have this place called felony friendly housing. And I have to say this because felony friendly is basically apartment complexes that take people that have felonies. Now, this apartment complex itself take anybody and everybody, people working, people not working, doing a program, not doing a program. So there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of things that happen, and the management is extremely poor. And they know that you don't have very many options to live anywhere else. So believe me, if you need something fixed or done, you wait on their time if they ever get to it. And if they don't, and if you do complain, they'll kick you out because they know you're limited in housing. So here I am. I don't have an adequate employment anymore. I can't get adequate housing anymore. And now let's talk about the family. This is another hard thing too. When you come out of incarceration, a lot of the family doesn't understand how to help you through this process. When I came out of being incarcerated, 2 of my sons were homeless at the time. Now, let's just think about the stress of that. I don't have employment. I'm having a hard time having housing, doing probation, and then people wonder why people relapse and reoffend. There's so many barriers. There's not even opportunities to be productive like you want to be productive. See, what this prison system has done, it's been set up where it makes money from when you come out, and then it makes money through each of the systems that it puts you in. But what do you benefit and profit from this when you can't have the fundamental things that you need, which is housing, great housing, or employment, some great employment, or let's say the support that you need. And I'm saying the support, family has a hard time, children have a hard time, but then the system itself makes it very hard on you because everything is siloed, it's separated. So every time you have to go to these different appointments in recovery, have 6 different appointments with 6 different people that are not talking to each other, you know what happens? People fall through the cracks. And that itself I've seen happen many times. It was a frustrating thing for me. That's why when I went to college and started getting my education, I started realizing how this system was set up to set me back. I've been doing prison ministry for 5 years, taught at the Women's Lockhart Prison, and through all this wisdom that had accumulated, I decided that I needed to do something. Because let me tell you, I'm very blessed and highly favored. I had a lot of great people that came around me, that helped me through this process and mentored me. And I wanted to be able to do that too, because I know education is freedom and no one can take that at least away from you. And let me just share this one more thing too. Somebody asked me, when will ever you feel like you are a citizen again, Lenora? And I told them, when legislation changes, when policy changes, and when our Constitution is rewritten, then I will feel like I am a citizen back in America.
Thanks for joining us for this virtual edition of Texas Public Radio's Worth Repeating, made possible by 80/20 Foundation, Mind Science Foundation, and Hayward God Photography. You can find more information about Worth Repeating and how to support Texas Public Radio online at tpr.org. Until next time, stay safe and be mindful that Black lives do indeed matter.